everyone does.
Yeah.
I can.
Well, I want to know what his argument is.
I don't even know what he's arguing
Can I
for.
just warn? I would expect Shamos to do this for me as a friend if I was in the same situation. Shamos, you look. He's not. You probably had the same perception of Isaac as I used to. You don't want to fucking do this. I wouldn't debate him. He's gonna wreck you. It's gonna be brutal. And just to let the server know, Shamos is gonna have the mental breakdowns the next few days and start personally attacking us in a rampage in here over the next few days after this. Just to warn everybody, Sam, be prepared to fight about mods over the next few days. Okay, if you guys want to go ahead, go ahead.
I feel like I have a hype man.
I mean, regardless, if you can fucking let it go fairly.
Okay, muting Concrete.
Good move. Good, smart first step.
Because you suck. This is what I was saying. Stop sucking. All right. Gamos, see you there?
Yeah.
So wait. So what's your argument?
Before what's the argument? Like I don't even know what the argument's for. It might not be a claim.
Well, I don't know. I was looking at this decision tree for this name to trait argument.
Decision.
And it seems like what's that?
It's talking about dialogue tree, Isaac, I think.
Well, there's two trees. There's the deduction tree and there's...
Yeah, I think the deduction tree for the no answer that leads to contradiction is just saying something extremely trivial, and there's also something wrong with what it's saying. Like, if you say, like...
Sorry, are you...
Well, I mean, I don't know
what it means that the argument
for a non-human animal and a human to have all of the same traits, yet it still be a non-human animal. I mean, it's just either just a human at that point.
Sorry, I need some clarity. Are you saying that the argument...
No, what I'm saying is it proves something trivial. I mean, in order for it to be trivial, it has to be sound. But I'm just saying that it also...
Wait, if you think, sorry, well, it depends how you mean trivial. I mean, someone might mean that in some kind of technical sense, but if you just mean that you think the conclusion is obvious, I do too. You know, I didn't think I'd ever have to actually write an argument to explain that to somebody. But I mean, if you spend time in the server, which you're not welcome to because you've been banned, but you'd be aware that like people constantly seem to not see that conclusion. So the argument is just there to spell it out. I'm glad if you think that it's obvious.
Well, there's also a seeming problem as well. I mean, I don't even know what it would mean to even refer to...
Sorry, a problem in a sound argument?
Well, what I'm saying is it might just be that you're doing something by equivocating.
Wait, no, sorry, 1 second. When you say there's a problem in a sound argument, that doesn't compute in my head. What do you mean? What is a problem?
What I'm saying is it might be the case that you're guilty of some type of equivocation. In that case, it wouldn't be sound. What I'm saying is,
okay, you actually... One second.
I'm not interested in having you interrupt me constantly. I'm not interested in you having you interrupt me constantly. I'll forward the objection and then you can respond to it. I don't give a fuck.
I don't want the wishy...
I'm not interested in you constantly interrupting me.
I don't
care. We can just stop it here if that's what you're going to do. I don't give a fuck.
I don't want the wishy-washy claims about there may be an equivocation. If you have a criticism, like there is an equivocation or there's some kind of problem, you tell it to me. Although now that you've said the argument is sound, you're almost bound to contradict yourself if you say there is a problem, right? Because a sound argument is kind of the highest standard that you have in logic, right? So are you saying there is an equivocation? Is there actually an error that you want to point out? Or are you just saying...
Let me explain to you what I mean without you interrupting me constantly.
No. Before explaining what you mean, what I want to know is...
Look, I'm not interested in playing your little game. I
want to understand if you're actually claiming that there's an error.
Let me clarify my point, okay?
Just tell me what the criticism is. We can talk about your argument for the criticism if you present the criticism and then we disagree about it, right? If you just say something that I agree with, we don't even need to get into the argument. Just tell me what the criticism...
Well, he's trying...
Yeah, I'm going to explain to you if you'll stop interrupting me.
Well,
it's pretty simple.
He's just trying to explain to you that this is the way he's interpreted the argument. So you're not letting him answer is not letting him express whether or not there's a criticism, right? So he just wants to make sure he understands the argument correctly.
I just want him... Wait, I'm not interested in him trying to make sure he understands the argument correctly.
Well, I want to make sure I'm not mischaracterizing you.
If he has a criticism...
Yes, I want to make sure before I levy a criticism that I'm not mischaracterizing you.
I would like you to just present.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't want to do that,
absolutely, I will.
then,
If you'll shut up.
So
Listen, I'll be glad to do that if you'll stop interrupting me.
Okay.
So you might be able to get away with this bullshit on your server. All right, thank you for the fucking 10th time. So you say something about.
All right, but I will cut you off if you don't go in.
Let him get his criticism out.
I will continue to ask to clearly hear the criticism. If anyone thinks that I'm going to cut to you just saying random things to me in text,
just stop over
like let the person talk, it's not going to work.
Don't you think you'll hear it?
Just tell me clearly.
What the fuck is this guy doing?
You guys want me to mod him?
Yeah, I mean, is it at all possible that we could get a mod in here? Because I don't know how many times I have to beg him.
No, I don't want you to mod him, but let's take turns.
Sorry. I just want to be clear.
I have to beg and plead.
I just want to be clear. If I'm muted again, I will immediately leave.
What kind of bullshit is this?
To actually tell me
what kind of fucking bullshit is this?
Shamos, what is the criticism?
You don't think I'm about to tell you, you stupid motherfucker? You want to give
Shamos is obfuscating. What is the Just tell me what it is. What's the criticism?
Okay, the criticism is as follows.
I heard at one point that there's an equivocation, or there might be
The criticism is this. If it's the case that you take a human and a non-human animal, and then you equalize all the traits, so that the trait that the animal has.
Shamos, what are you? You're really frustrated.
I don't know what
the argument. I'm sorry. There's.
What's the reason?
Because there's an argument which he has said is sound. Yeah, because there's an argument which he has said is sound. If there's a criticism, I just want him to point out to me what's. Right, what are you criticizing? Are you saying the first premise is false? Are you saying the second premise is false? Are you saying the argument isn't valid?
What I'm saying is it might be the case that you're equivocating, and I want to make sure if that's the case.
I'm not interested in might be the case. What is the argument? Is there an argument that I am equivocating?
Well, I need to understand that I'm interpreting you correctly.
Whether or not you're equivocating is going to depend on further information.
It's going to depend on whether or not I've interpreted you correctly.
Okay, so just to be clear, right now,
what can I do here?
Just to be clear, just to be clear. Right now, just to be clear, right now, you don't actually have an argument that I am equivocating. What you want to do is try to fish. What you want to do is fish around and try to find.
That's not true.
Now, if you want to do that, we can move into that.
Listen,
but I want you to grant. I want you to grant. I want you to grant that right now you have no argument.
What the fuck can I do with this?
Hold on, honestly, Isaac, why are you acting like this, man? Look, the problem is, just calm down.
Debate, honestly.
Look, Shamos.
I don't want to hear from anyone else right now. I'm happy to talk to Shamos. Now,
hold on
1 second.
But so look, the problem moving forward.
Hello.
Yeah, you are not above moderation.
What can I do here, Josh? What can I do here?
Ask yourself, will you unban Shamos?
1 second.
Will you unban Shamos and we can do it in your server?
Sorry. 1 second. Now, if Shamos has a criticism, I'm happy for him to actually spell out what the criticism is and deliver it. If he doesn't have a criticism and he wants to fish around to try to find a criticism,
I'm not trying to fish around.
What I would like is,
don't you realize in order for someone to
I have mute. Thank fucking God.
Wait, no. Wait, I have to shut it down. You guys can't debate. You guys can't debate here. I'm sorry. Can you unban him from your server and take it over there?
I have no interest in unbanning this person. I just want to be clear though. So
listen, let me ask you a
sorry. Hello.
Listen, you continually overtalk and interrupt people. You're just
shit.
Yeah, this is so dumb.
I ask one single question. Don't I need to interpret you correctly by what you mean by a certain word to assert that you're equivocating?
Criticism. If what he wants to do,
so what do you mean?
Wants to do. Is instead fish around to try to find something that he can run a criticism of.
No,
he can do
that,
but he can start by saying he doesn't currently have one. So which is
listen, I'm trying to make sure.
All right, guys, hold on, guys. All right, look. Let's just take a breath. Okay, look.
It seems in this conversation right now, you're not fully aware of the argument, and you may have a criticism, and you just want to ask questions to clarify what the argument is.
No, I want to make sure that I'm understanding him correctly before I levy the criticism.
Guys, okay. That's what I just said.
Go ahead.
You don't think it's proper before you get into argument to make sure that you're characterizing him correctly before you attack their argument?
That's literally.
No, you said maybe he has an argument, maybe he doesn't. I'm just to make sure that I'm characterizing.
Oh my God, Shamos. It seems like you want to ask questions.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question and make sure I understand them correctly.
All right, Shamos, dude. Okay, to see if you have a criticism or not.
Now, and now this is how I'm proceeding, right? If Shamos has a criticism, he can present that criticism right now. And if I, in fact, don't agree with it, we can look at what the argument is.
Yeah, I'd be glad to present the criticism.
If he doesn't have a criticism and he wants to fish around and try to find
the criticism,
then what I want him to say is that right now I don't have a criticism, but I'd like to fish for one. And we can do that.
No, listen, I'll give you the criticism. I'd gladly give it to you if you just shut the fuck up.
Sorry, what did you say?
It seems like
this is how you guys debate someone. Seriously, you guys are fucking pathetic.
I'm trying to help.
I don't give a fuck. You don't need to help me. All you have to do is fucking tell him to shut up for about 2 minutes.
Can you hear someone who I can't hear right now? I might have the person muted. Do I? Oh, I don't have the server muted.
For like 2 minutes, and then I will fucking be done, and he'll understand my criticism.
Look, guys, shut up for a second. Look,
this is such a fucking joke.
Oh my God!
I don't need your help. All I need for him to do is shut the fuck up and listen for like 60 seconds or a minute or a couple minutes.
Please, it actually facilitates the conversation.
Okay, look, it's okay to say, listen, I want to get clarity on what the argument is. I may or may not have a criticism. I just want clarity just to see if I do have a criticism. I want to learn about the argument. I want clarity to make sure.
I do have a criticism. It doesn't change anything whether or not I have a criticism.
I can't hear him, so if I was talking over him when you were speaking,
he's muted someone.
This isn't going to work.
In 10 minutes straight.
So just to be clear, what I'm open to Shamos doing is either presenting his criticism, or if he doesn't have a criticism,
honestly, stating
that,
honestly,
and then if he wants to try to fish for one, he can fish for one. So I'm gonna
honestly, Isaac, you're being a complete faggot right now. Look, the whole point is right. So actually,
1 second, I'm just trying to.
So actually, yeah, your server muted now. The whole point is, man. Hold on, Shamos, just calm down. Whether or not you're equivocating is going to be contingent on further information. And that's what Shamos wants to probe for. And that's a fair question.
He left.
I mean, that's his fault.
Here, hey, Godless. Godless, can I have the honor of banning him?
What a complete fucking idiot.
Holy crap, I've never heard anything like that.
He'll probably never ban you. Have to ban it, but I do agree. He was Avi. Why wouldn't he let Shamos talk?
I think what was happening was... So, look, what I perceived was that, he wanted a concession that if you're whether you have a criticism or not hinges on what your clarity for the argument, then at least concede that you don't at the moment have a criticism.
Don't all criticisms hang on that, Avi? In order for anyone to criticize anyone, they have to understand what they mean, right? Don't all criticisms hang on that? Okay, so what kind of point does he think he's making by saying all criticisms hang on this very feature? You have to know what someone's means in order to criticize them. So you don't have a criticism? What do you mean I don't have a fucking criticism?
Shut up for a second. Hold on a second. All right, so but the thing is, Avi, it's like, okay, I think that really that doesn't really have much to do with it, right? Because the point is that if you phrase something humbly, not really a lot hangs on that. Like if you say, well, it might be the case that that's even if it is the case, like you can still use that phraseology. So it does seem like
that's not what we said. Look, if there's a difference between someone who says, okay, what I heard was that I do have a criticism. It wasn't that like I may have a criticism, whether depending on understanding. I heard that it is the case that I have a criticism.
No, that's not what he said though. That Shamos said initially. I remember it verbatim. He said there may be an equivocation. Okay. That was his.
No, but I also heard that I do have a criticism.
Right. Well,
that came later on.
The one thing that he said.
I heard it before.
The one thing that he said was the one thing that he said was that he thought it was trivial, but Isaac was just asking him if he thought it was sound.
Why did you ban him? Sorry, go ahead.
Because capitalism is a fucking faggot.
No, he ended the ban instantly.
You're a fucking idiot.
What are you
Nobody
talking
gives a
about?
fuck, dude.
He ended the ban. He just
I just did that. I took the screenshot and then did it. Stop being retarded. He's not in this.
I banned Ask Yourself from Big.
Capitalism, why would you do that?
Oh,
why
it's
Why would
I'm
you
trying to get
ban
him back.
somebody
Like,
for-
yeah, sure, why not?
He just unbanned him. He did it for the screenshot, but it's just really stupid anyway.
I'm taking his admin. You're demoted to mod, capitalism.
all right, going back.
Oh my god.
No, come on, Godless. He just did that for the memes. He
Why
unbanned
are
him
you
immediately.
a heavy-handed bitch right now? What the fuck?
Oh my.
Wait,
Okay,
so
who unmuted Concrete? I'm taking their mods too.
We don't wait.
Wow, this is gonna
You
really
guys, okay,
take
real
right now.
quick, guys, hold on, shut up for a second. Look, if neither gets server muted and someone we can have a good mod, I think I was being a good mod, not to be whatever. But if you don't agree with me being mod, like someone else can be a mod. But if we don't mute Shamos and we don't mute Isaac, can we?
Well, can we do it
just
in
have those?
Isaac's? It's going to cause too many problems in my server for me and my
No,
mom.
Isaac
We do it in your-
Isaac,
Godless.
It's pretty easy. It's better direct.
Yeah, look.
Wait, I don't understand. Wait, I'm sorry, Avi. I have to fight with my mods for a second. You're telling me, Zax, you don't think it's going to cause problems with the mods anymore when it already has caused multiple problems?
Well, I just got
It's
here.
causing
so I don't know
problems
that.
with me and you right now.
Godless, just depending on the format. Look, if we, I think a good way to do this might just be to have it timed for both of them.
Yeah,
They're gonna. That might be a good way.
Make a server. Make a server where no one can talk. Make a channel where no one can talk with them.
that's silly.
Well, the thing is, I don't know if it's silly because it seemed like Shamos was immediately seeking clarification, so it'd be hard to actually make this like with opening statements if Shamos is looking for clarification.
Why can't we do it in another server? Why does it have to be done in here?
Godless, you have 85 people in here right now.
Well, because
Yeah,
Godless
but I
isn't.
care
Well,
more about my community because all the new people are going to leave. And then if I have a horrible falling out with my mod team, right, we're fighting with each other, then the server will just collapse. So what good is the fucking 85 new people going to do?
We're not fighting right now, Godless. Like I'm able to. I just got here. I was out doing stuff. I can.
Okay,
I'm sure it's
capitalism
fine.
ban. Ask yourself, what do you think about that?
Well,
you made capitalism the mod. So.
No, but just to
Yeah,
get.
and then he said he's going. But what did he say? He's going back to Tom's.
No,
he's not.
Oh,
Godless.
Yeah, he's in Tom's right now. Right?
He just banned him for the memes. He unbanned him immediately.
Yeah, but he's in.
Well, that can still cause problems.
Like he shouldn't have. Like he shouldn't have done it. Don't get me wrong.
Can I please speak to Godless?
Okay, if
We can do it in another server.
Is going back to somebody message capitalism. If he's really going to go back to Tom's right now, he's getting banned.
He's in here.
This is how many much problems he's causing. I don't understand why you guys want to do this in here because I will ban capitalism. If he wants to go back to
in here
Tom's.
right now. Oh my god, just get the fuck ask yourself back in here. And we'll just moderate the fucking conversation. It's that simple.
We're just evolving into literal fucking drama for no
Godless.
Guys, you have.
Can we just get back on topic?
So wait, we'll get back on topic. If I want Anderkis, Zaxium, Afia, and Sam, you all swear to me as a friend that this isn't going to cause problems with the mod team?
No,
It wasn't causing a problem to begin with. Zach, hold on 1 second.
I don't
Zach, you got
understand why
priority
you guys
speaker.
think that this would be good.
Wait, stop. This is horrible.
What the fuck is the matter with you? You're sick.
Zach, you got priority speaker on. Every time you fucking press your push start.
Yeah, that's on purpose for now until the debate starts, and then I'll go back and not use it. But I was just using it because every time people talk,
we just lost capitalism to Tom.
What the fuck? So you just want to overtalk
anybody
anybody that's talking at the time?
We got 85 people, so what? It would have been better if they had never come in here now that we lost one of our own to Tom's.
He's right here. He's here.
Okay.
He's here, Godless.
I was
Get the fuck out of my server.
Everybody shut the fuck up for a second.
God.
I would like to please talk to Godless.
Thank you.
That's why I had it on, so I could respond directly to
Oh,
Gonzalez.
I got this.
So I just have one quick question. Would you guys be okay with Abby being moderator for this debate?
Dallas.
Yeah.
You being serious or you just trolling?
Well, I'm exaggerating, but I think that it would have been better if they never came in. It's not. I don't know why people think that that's good. If 80 people is good for the server. That's not going to hold the community together. If we got people a mod fight and people going back to Tom's.
I agree with that, but I think it's a little bit blown up to where you ain't got to worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. I think it's being blown up more than what you think it is. I think you'll be fine, is what I'm saying. It's good that there's 85 people. We just need you to ask yourself back in there and have the
have to choose between like appeasing Ask Yourself, and he wasn't being fair to Shamos, so I don't want to have to choose between that.
Well, you don't really have to appease him. It's just you don't have to mute him either. You can just moderate. Somebody just be like, hey, let Shamos finish. If he actually needs to finish, right? Or whatever, and then just move it on like that.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead and try to get him back in here, and we'll moderate.
Yeah, just get him back in here. He won't be moderated.
He's not going to come back in here after capitalism banned him.
Go to no more.
Okay, look, guys, we're doing it here. I'm sending an invite. You guys can join. You guys can not join.
Why do we have to join another server?
You don't have to.
No, I'm saying like if we have to, if we want to listen to the debate, right? But I'm saying why can't?
Bro, that shit is hilarious. These people are fucked in the head, dog.
Yo, capitalism sent me flying. Like, Park is really the biggest retard. This whole affair.
Okay, guys.
Yo, what is with the fucking number of channels in this shit? Jesus Christ.
So this server is a different type of server. It is a server that is a repository for information of scientific data. So there's going to be a lot of channels for a lot of different topics on a lot of different empirical things. It's an empirical based.
I like that.
Which is the one for antibiotic use and dermatology? Where's that channel?
Yeah, we can do that. We can make one for that as well, Sugar. But let's not.
My friend Sugar, he's a huge fan of yours. Look, he even has a doctor avatar. Can he please ask you one question about the coronavirus real quick?
After the debate.
Okay.
Okay. So, where is Isaac?
I'm here.
Okay, cool. So let me. All right. So what I'm going to ask for you guys, and if you guys, this is going to be a 1v1 between Isaac. I'm going to request that you guys don't interrupt, that you don't interject.
Sorry, are you talking to me or to the room?
To the room. I'm to the room. So if you do, I will have to serve or mute you. I don't have to do that.
We'll just let the room. They can talk. It's easy.
There's no text chat for us. Is that correct?
There is. Okay. So, I'm going to be modding this in good faith. Please try to everyone be in good faith and let's hopefully have a good debate. Where we left off, it seemed like there wanted to be clarity. It didn't seem like, in my interpretation, that there was a criticism at this point in time, but there may be a criticism based on whether there's any clarity or not. Now, if I've gotten that.
No, that's right. What I want is for Shamos to either just concede he doesn't currently have a criticism and that he wants to fish for one, or if he currently has one, he should be able to provide it without asking any questions.
Now, it may not be that he's fishing for it. It may just be it may be he's fishing for it. It may just be that he.
I don't say fishing with a negative connotation. Okay. It's just he doesn't have it currently, and he needs to try to ask things to find a criticism. But the initial thing that I was told was that he had a criticism.
Okay.
So which is it there, Shamos? Do you have a criticism, or do you need to fish? Oh, sorry. If he's talking, I might still have him muted. One.
He's not talking.
Okay, I have him.
Shamos, are you there?
Yeah. So do you have a criticism, or are you just wanting to?
Is there some reason you can't talk, Gamers?
I don't hear him. I'm messaging him to see if he's there. He may have stepped away.
Well, while he's away, I do have a question. What's the deal with this guy?
What? Was it alright?
Well, people keep telling me he has some kind of issue with me for being Jewish or something. Is that a thing?
All the mental illness that is contained in Shamos.
It's just not iron. He has like a, let's say.
Hey, can I be heard?
Yep.
Yeah, you're Crystal.
Sure. Yeah, so Shamos, the question on the table is, do you have a criticism, or are you...
I mean, don't you think in order for someone to have a criticism of someone's argument, they need to know?
Sorry, Shamos, I'd like an answer. Do you have a criticism, or are you...
Well, I certainly have a criticism. Now, I'm going to ask you. I would like to ask you a question.
Sorry. No, Shamos, I'm just going to stop you right now. I'm not playing this stupid fucking game with you. Okay?
Why are you such a dishonest interlocutor?
If you have a criticism, deliver the criticism. Well, if you have to ask me questions, then concede that you do not currently have a criticism, and you're.
I certainly do have a criticism, but what I would like, I'd like to ask you a quick question.
You say I do have.
Stop being a dishonest interlocutor. Stop being dishonest.
Now,
all right, guys. All right,
the criticism.
I mean, is there any way to make him be an honest interlocutor? I'm not sure if that's even possible, but I'm just
guys, stop for a second. Look, if you want to look this part, like I was on board with the possibility, like, okay, maybe you don't have a criticism, you could learn about the argument, you want to ask questions, see if you have a criticism. But if you're going to say that you have a criticism, I take it to be that you actually, based on your knowledge of the argument, that your knowledge of the argument is sufficient and your understanding of the argument is sufficient to levy a criticism. Now, if that's not the case, then just say, okay, go back to the question asking. But if your knowledge of the argument,
I just want to ask him a question and just go through a little bit of a dialogue without the content.
See how he won't do it.
Listen. There's no need for all of this. Listen, honest people don't have a need for this type of stuff.
Is it A or B?
Yeah, but here's the thing. Once you say that my knowledge of the argument is sufficient such that I can levy a criticism, then
I want to ask a quick question before I go ahead and levy the criticism.
Then say I don't have a criticism.
What do you mean? I just want to ask a simple question that any honest interlocutor would answer straight away.
So
you can't even answer a simple. So I can't even have.
I don't want to get too distracted talking to others, but just to Josh right now. Sorry, but just to what Josh just said. It's not that they're mutually exclusive. It's that a good faith actor, if they have a criticism, can just deliver the criticism and doesn't have to ask a prior question, right? No. If he wants to fish around to find, okay, well, we can agree to disagree there, but that's how I will be operating in this discussion. Now, if Shamos,
you're just operating like a dishonest motherfucker.
If Shamos has a criticism, he can deliver that criticism. If Shamos wants to fish for a criticism, he can tell me that no, I don't currently have one, and you can fish if you want. So which is it, Shamos?
Or he can say that he's not aware that he currently has.
I mean, all that matters to me is that if he has one, he should not need to ask me something.
Well, I mean, listen, it seems to me
I'm not. Shamos, look, we're good, but I am already tired of this. So we're gonna do the 5 times.
Yeah, because you're dishonest.
Once we hit 5, I will just leave.
Yeah, okay, you're dishonest. You're gonna leave anyways because you're dishonest.
Guys, 1 second, guys. Look, here's the thing, Shamos. Like, once you say that you do actually have sufficient knowledge of the argument, that you do have a criticism. It is the case. It is true that you should be able to present the criticism.
I'd be willing to do that, and I already said that I would. I just want to make it very clear, and I was going to try to make it clear Socratically that in order to have any criticism of any argument, hold on, I'm tired of being interrupted continuously by dishonest
I get it.
Sorry, Avi, I'm just gonna spoken with in my entire life.
That's try number 1, Shamos. We're gonna do 5. Now, do you want to present the criticism, or are you fishing?
Yeah, I won't be doing that until I make my point clear.
Okay, that's try number 2. Do you want to present?
Hey, wait.
Until I make my point clear, that's 3. I won't be doing it until I make my point clear. That's 4. I won't be doing it until I make my point clear. That's 5. See you later, faggot.
Hey, guys, this is the moderator stepping in.
Goodbye, dishonest motherfucker. You wanted to weigh out this whole fucking night. Now you got it, you punk.
Sorry. Is there a criticism?
Guys,
fishing.
Okay, guys.
Okay, that's 4, and then one final.
Wait.
Sorry, Avi. I will give you.
Goodbye, you coward. You want to weigh out? There you go, coward.
If you would like. So, Shamos, the question is, can you actually deliver your criticism?
Yeah, I'm going to make another point first. There's 5.
Fishing?
I'm going to make another point first. See you later, faggot.
So
dishonest motherfucker.
Okay. All right. So neither of you were listening to the moderator in that. So I'm very unhappy right now.
How do you deal with somebody that dishonest?
No, it was you too, Shamos. It was you and him that I'm disappointed in, because neither of you were listening to me when I tried to step in. So
yeah, I'm not interested in having an honest dialogue with someone that's hell-bent on controlling what I say, when I say it, the method of which I deliver it.
But Shamos, I was being a good faith moderator there, and I was trying to step in, and you were also not.
But you never admonished AY for fucking over talking.
I tried to over. No, I said it too. I tried to over talk him too, and then he wouldn't let me as well.
You gotta be clear. You gotta say, please don't do that. It's not helpful. You have to let him know that you're not on his side.
I said that. Wait, no, I said. I said
you were against Shamos.
No, that's. Oh my God! I said it. I was stepping in on both of them. Listen. But also the point being, like, I know what Shamos is going to say. It's true of all. It's true. Look, I take it to be that Shamos is going to say it's true of all of arguments, that to deliver an argument you need to have some sort of clarity on the argument. So that's like a trivial sense. Oh wait, concrete. I'm sorry.
My point was, Avi, my point was secondarily is that in order to have a criticism, okay, at all, you have to do that. Okay, and so if he's not allowing me to do that, then of course it trivially follows that I don't have a criticism. Right?
Yeah, sure. But I agree. I agree that in order to have a criticism, you need to have some sort of clarity on the argument. But once you say, here's the thing: once you say that, okay, I am at the point where I do and I can deliver a criticism, I take that to mean I'm at the point where I do have sufficient knowledge of the argument and sufficient clarity of the argument such that I can levy a criticism. Like, honestly, like, this whole stupid thing could just have been avoided by either of you. If either Isaac would have just said, listen, oh, okay, fine, ask your question. Or if you would have just said, okay, fine, right now I don't have a criticism.
He's a dishonest motherfucker. Anyone that was wanting to honestly have a discussion would have just let it go. He would have just said, okay, what's the problem, man? Just kind of explain to me what you got going on. What are you thinking? He wasn't doing any of that.
Shamos, I'm disappointed in both of the behaviors right now, because both of you could have got past this. Both of this.
No, I'm not dishonest the way he was. I'm willing to sit down, have a discussion, answer questions, and go through it. I'm not trying to limit the way my interlocutor replies to me. I'm not interested in giving him the manner of which he must reply.
Josh,
I'm interested in having just a straightforward dialogue, and I'm not interested in trying to control people. Okay. Now, I was making a very, very standard point that I just wanted to make sure I understood what he meant, even if that's just to confirm it once before. Now, there's a bunch of things wrong with this argument, and I would have loved to have walked through with him, but it's obvious he had his defenses up. He's wanted to be dishonest. He wanted a chance to run away.
But you as well, Sham. Look, if you had an easy way around that. You had a very easy way around that.
No, but the easy way around that is to admit that I don't have a criticism. What the fuck do you mean?
If your criticism, wait 1 second. If your criticism really is contingent on clarity, then you could have just said that, okay, I may or may not have a criticism. I don't know it, but it is contingent on me getting more clarity. Right
That's precisely what I led with. That's precisely what I led with.
That is kind of what Shamos was trying to say, though.
Isn't that what I led with, Josh? I may or may not have a criticism. Isn't that what I fucking led with?
When I clarified that, I heard you say after, I do have a criticism, and at that point, I couldn't defend you anymore, Shamos, with that. I couldn't use that defense in your favor because
Well, Avi, consider this though. So the whole point of this argument or quote unquote debate was because they had a disagreement. So before he actually got into the full disagreement, I think he probably just wanted to clarify that he thought his disagreement was actually accurate. So you can't really call him for just trying to clarify his position insofar as the disagreement
again. But then the problem, I understand that, but if that's the case, then he could have just said, "Okay, well, I just need clarity before I can make the claim that I do actually."
If he honestly wanted to talk about it, don't you think that would have all became clear once we presented it?
And if you honestly wanted to talk about it, you could have done this too.
No, but what I'm saying is, if he was interested in understanding those things, they would have become clear when we had the dialogue. Don't you agree? And I'm ready to have the dialogue, and I'm never refused.
If you and Shamos, and if you wanted to honestly have the dialogue, it would have been very easy for you to just say, "Okay, yeah, you're right. It's just like any other argument.
I understand
your argument.
I need there, and I'm not going to be consoled in a debate like that. What he's trying to do is get me to say I don't have a criticism, or I may or may not.
I don't say yeah.
It's not that, right? Like, so I do think that probably it wasn't. Well. I do think that Isaac was okay. So here's a few things, Avi. One thing I think is that it's clear that Isaac wasn't interested in whether or not Gamos had a criticism, right? Like that much is clear. The second thing is just that I do think that you could have sidestepped all that if you had just given an argument. Gamos. So it's like it would have been better if you had just given an argument. But I do think that Isaac wasn't being intellectually honest, right? Because I mean, if he were, he would have. Like let's just take his first example. Like the first thing that he said is that he takes it that it's trivial, right? And then Isaac asked if that was sound, and then Gamos agreed that that it would be sound, right? If it's trivial, but that doesn't mean that something's being trivial is not a criticism of an argument. You know, that should have been the first red flag. If you're just saying something that's akin to A equals A, then you're not really arguing for anything. You're just saying something trivial, you know. And so I think it is a point. Like I was saying, I think the first thing he said, and then he tried to say, well, am I equivocating or is it trivial? And it's just that we were at that point when it devolved into this whole clarity thing, right? And I do think that if Isaac was interested, it's clear that he wasn't interested. He even said so himself. If he were interested in the criticism, he would have allowed Gamos to speak a little bit to get clarity and make sure they understood each other, you know.
Yeah, I mean, look, the position I take is that I don't think it didn't seem like either was actually really that interested because, again, the reason I say this is because there were clear outs for both of them to actually skip the degeneration, and neither of them took the out to skip the degeneration.
I did take the out. I said, listen, I'll give the argument right now. I just want to say one thing before I do.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't have added that. I want to say one.
So let me get this straight. So I agree to give the argument that he wants, right, without ever asking him anything about what he meant or anything like that. All I did was want to make one single point before that, and I was refused. I mean, this is insane. This is I can't. I've never ever experienced anything like this.
No, but if you say that you have sufficient clarity to give the argument, and then you say, oh, but I just want to say one more thing, and you know that the way he's acting, he's going to be like, oh, if you say one more thing instead of an argument, I'm out. Then if you insist on saying that one more thing, you could
out. That just shows he wanted.
Yeah, okay, fine.
He's a fucking
but it shows. Yes, but okay, fine. Even if that's true, if you insist on giving him that way out, it shows that you're not interested as much either. Instead of giving the argument,
it just shows that I'm unwilling to allow someone to try to control me.
Right. So you could be interested in more egoic things, like, okay, I don't care, Shamos. Like, if I would have just liked to see
let him take control of me in a discussion in order to participate with him. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to grant anyone that. Okay, period.
Right.
So he can be an honest interlocutor, and we can go over what I think is wrong, and we can get to the bottom of it, and I won't be controlled. Or he can just go and leave like he wanted to do in the fucking first place.
Honestly, to be honest, I agree that he wasn't really that interested in the conversation. I also think that it would have been a lot better if you just levied the that if you just levied the argument instead of even, especially knowing how he would have reacted.
I mean, I conceded to him multiple times. I don't know how much more terrible it could be.
I don't think that's really fair, Avi, because like just think about it for a second. And because I would put my cards on the table, I would have much rather had Isaac trounce Gamos, because Gamos is just like a reprehensible piece of trash, right? But just like if we're just talking about what actually happened, you know, it's clear that Isaac would not have allowed Gamos any leeway whatsoever, even if he had started giving an argument. You know, so under those conditions, it would be unreasonable for Gamos to have acquiesced, right? Like it's if he actually wants to come, because I mean, just think about the way he was acting. Like Gamos got like 5 words into a sentence, you know, and then Isaac just started interrupting with that really minuscule point, which was Isaac wasn't even capable of evaluating the criticism. He could have let him go. He could have let him see if there was a criticism there. And in the process, he could have said, okay, well, that's not a criticism. But he wasn't doing any of that. So even if he had started rendering an argument, even if he had started giving that argument, there was no hope for that debate to have gone on, because Isaac wouldn't have allowed it.
You could be right. I would just like to have seen the argument delivered to him if there was an argument. But I did look again. I think it's pretty clear that Isaac wasn't interested. But honestly, I do think here's one thing that he said that I do think was fair. I think he said that, look, I do want to clarify. I do want to, at the very least, you to clarify whether it is the case that you have enough clarity to deliver a criticism of the argument, or whether you don't have enough clarity to deliver a criticism of the argument and you would just like to get more clarity. That's a fair question to ask, and that's not a question that I heard an answer to. I did hear an answer. Wait, I'm sorry. I did hear an answer. The only answer I heard to that actually was Shamos saying, "Oh no, I do have a criticism. I certainly have a criticism."
And I said I'd be willing to render it after I make one point. Look, first I started off by let me just show you where I think that I was being more than fair to this guy.
Well,
I started off by
what the criticism is. Wait, Avi, you've defended the name the trait argument, right? Like you. Yeah, so why don't we just figure out, like, screw this whole Isaac thing. Why don't we just figure out with you what the criticism is?
Yeah, I'd be willing to do that.
All right, what's the criticism?
Yeah, oh my god, yeah, we could have just had this be Ivy, so Ivy could have been the proxy the entire time.
All right, what's the criticism?
Well, I have quite a few. So the first one is where part of the deduction tree, which is to show that there's actually a contradiction, right? I agree that it shows a contradiction, but in a trivial way that's completely unconnected to any of the content of the argument. And there might just be something there that's completely just wrong about it in the first place. So the first thing is he's saying, if all of the traits of one thing, namely a human, and all of the traits of a non-human animal were all of the same, okay, then to deny that there's no moral property that's conferred on one and not the other would be a contradiction. Now that's true because you would just be denying that like a human is a human or something, or all of the properties that a human has. And that's something that doesn't seem very relevant to veganism or animals or humans. It's just kind of getting them to say something extremely trivial. But here's the thing. There's also a worry, right? The worry is something like, what does it even mean to refer to it as a non-human animal when it has all of the same traits as a human? It's no longer a non-human animal, so it's just silly to even.
No, I'm familiar with these criticisms. Okay, so let's take it one at a time. So yes, I agree that it is a trivial, that the deduction at least shows a trivial truth. But the way the argument is deployed is in a dialogue. So yes, there is a trivial truth to it. But all that is to show, by the way, you'd be surprised at how many people go down the trivial truth wrongly and actually do end up in that contradiction. But regardless, what ends up usually happening is that a trait is named, that there is a, if you start off with the deduction tree is only levied if you start off with the dialogue tree. The deductive argument is only levied to someone who goes down a certain path in the dialogue tree.
Yeah,
a path that just says that there is no difference. And so if you actually do agree that it's trivially true, that argument actually wouldn't even be rendered toward you. You would never actually.
What I'm saying is, I agree that you have to start down the dialogue. You have to disagree that there's some same property, and then he just shows you that if they all have the same properties, then it's a contradiction to deny it because you're denying something like P is not P or something. Okay?
So in other words,
it's trivial, and you don't even have to. It doesn't have anything to do with veganism.
Wait. 1 second, Shamos. So so the response to the triviality thing is if the argument showing something trivially true would only be levied towards someone who rejects something that's trivially true. That's the issue. Like the key is that you want to say, okay, that's true, but trivially true. Well, the response to that is in the dialogue tree, it's only going to be given. It's only going to be presented to someone who in the first place is rejecting something that's trivially true. So yes, I agree that it's a trivial truth. However, that doesn't make it a problem because in the first place, it's constructed in such a way with the dialogue tree that it will only be given to someone who is denying a trivial truth.
But it's done in such a way that it's kind of like misleading and dishonest. If you said to someone, do you think human... Listen, if you just stated it like this, right? Because he keeps referring to that same object with all the same traits as a human or a non-human animal, right? But that's not... I mean, that's wrong to even say that. Right?
How it started off is it's just with a question like, what's the difference? What's the difference between one context and not the other that would make the difference for whether this is acceptable on your view? He doesn't say like, do you think all the traits are there and then it would be like logically impossible? Do you think all the traits can be swapped and then they still retain on more of or whatever? Like he doesn't do that. He just says, okay, when he starts with it, just say, okay, what's the difference? You say with one thing in one context, you say another thing in not another context. Now what's the difference? Like what's the difference for which you say not the other? I've heard it many times.
Yeah, what I'm saying is this: there's a couple worries. Like they said, the first worry is that it's really there's about 3 on just the no to that decision tree. The one is that's very misleading. If you were to just openly say to someone, "Hey, do you think a human that John couldn't have all the properties that John has?" I mean, it's pretty obvious there. But when you start saying something like, "Oh, if you took a non-human animal and gave all the properties to that a human had, would the non-human animal not have the moral property?" At that point, it's wrong-headed.
That's a different criticism. Okay, so your first criticism with the trivia. So that's the second criticism. We can go one by one. I have replies to both. So the trivial. So we could just to be clear about the trivial criticism. That's taken off the table because it's only levied to people who would deny a trivial truth. So I don't take the trivial criticism to be a criticism of the argument because it's not actually being levied to anyone who would not do anything other than deny something that is a trivial truth. Now, if you're talking about something, the weirdness of saying, okay, well, can a human not be a non-human? Is the argument implicitly affirming some kind of human, non-human thing? That's been a very old criticism. And the way that Isaac has constructed the argument actually gets around all of that. What I want you to do, the way it's phrased, and there's many videos of him doing it this way, is there's basically possible worlds. Just imagine a series of possible worlds. Look, on the one hand, you have a chicken. On the one hand, you have a human. And then he would just ask, like, okay, just imagine a series of possible worlds where each possible world is just a predicable difference that's changed such that on the one end, you have a human, on the other end, you have a chicken. Now, all he's asking is, where in this series of possible worlds does value change for you? That's all really is being meant. And I've heard this clarification multiple times from Isaac as well. So asking that question doesn't entail any sort of weirdness of a human being a non-human or whatnot, or entail any of those kind of potentially contradictory things.
Well, there's a problem that seems to arise from that, because what if a person just held the view that it was no trait on its own that did this? It was like the instantiation of a certain group of traits or something.
That's not a problem either, because that's not. I've heard that as well.
You wouldn't be able to find that out by going to possible.
No, you would, because a possible world could contain multiple traits.
Yeah, but then the same problem arises that you're trying to escape by appealing to the.
What's the same problem?
Look, the same problem is if you were to ascribe all of the traits to them, then it would be. Hold on, I'm getting like 1 billion fucking text messages right now.
No. So no, Shamos, nothing in those possible worlds would end up being the same thing. It would just remember. Look, so here we have. Look, on the one end we have a chicken. On the one end we have a human. If we end up ascribing all the same traits, we're not in a possible world anymore. We're just right back at the initial thing. We're right back at the initial chicken. So someone can say, like, listen, there is no trait in any of these possible worlds except for what is just right at the end, where is we just have everything is just with the chicken. That's perfectly coherent. It doesn't entail any contradictions.
I think you're not by your response, you're not understanding what my criticism is. Let me be clear. What I'm saying is, in the video, he says this word. He refers to an object that has all the same traits as the human, as a non-human animal, a second time after he's already ascribed the traits to it. And what I'm saying is that's extremely misleading. If you were to just come out and say, do you think that John doesn't have all the properties that John has, which is basically...
I understand. No, so what you said is something I haven't gotten any more clarity. If you're telling me I haven't understood your criticism, everything you've said hasn't gotten me to understand your criticism anymore, because basically I already think I understand it. So that's why my reply was a clarification of what was meant. So, and Isaac, there are many videos of Isaac clarifying with the possible worlds thing. Which I haven't heard a criticism of, by the way. So the possible worlds, you can contain one or multiple traits. And if they go back to equalizing, it's just back right at the first one where you started. And someone can have a coherent response to such as that. They can say, okay, none of the different traits that are different in any of these different worlds would actually make the difference for me, except if it was just back right straight at the chicken. And that's fine. So that's perfectly coherent. There may be entailments of that can be criticized. That's fine. But I don't see how that commits one to any sort of logical contradiction by implicitly or explicitly affirming a human being a non-human. Including, and
it's obvious that you don't understand the criticism. Let me make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, make it simple.
Let me make it as simple as possible. Do you think it makes... You take two objects, right? And then you have a square and a circle, right? And you take all the properties of a circle and ascribe it to the square. Do you think it makes sense to then... Okay,
see, that's not what you want me to... That's not what's done. Wait, no. That's not what's
just being... Let me please just... Let me feel as if I'm getting my point out. At least let me have the illusion that I'm able to get my point out, okay? Now, I'm saying
there's no need to talk like that, Shannon. Look,
no, what I'm saying is
coming here in good.
Okay, well, have good faith to let me finish. I'll be brief. Okay, I'm saying if you take a square and a circle and then you ascribe all the properties of the circle to the square, okay, does it make any sense after that ascription to then refer to it again as a square?
It would only make sense nominally, as if you're referring to the history of the circle that's been turned into.
Do you think that can potentially mislead people?
I mean, maybe potentially there could be a misleading. I don't know. But what's the point?
Well, the point is I don't think that anybody, I don't think very many people would deny the fact that if does not have all the same properties that John has. I mean, that's just something just completely trivial. And but when you say something like, well, if you took all the properties of a non-human animal and gave them all the properties that a human had, would the non-human animal then not have the moral property? It's just like, you're not even at that point. The only thing that would make sense is if you're just trying... it just seems ultimately misleading, right? Because that thing isn't a non-human animal. And just using that word, even in historic context, is just trying to confuse the matter. Look, just state it for what it is. But first of all, that's not what he's doing, okay? And then it just leads to something that I think is ultimate. This is my final criticism with that part of the decision tree. It just leads to something that's ultimately not even relevant to veganism at that point.
Okay.
Right?
So, Shamos, I've let you go on. So, again, just with the clarification that Isaac has signed off on and said himself with the possible worlds framing, do you disagree with anything about that? And do you think it's misleading with the possible world framing that I mentioned? Because you keep going back to the original video. You keep going back to that video where you heard Isaac say the iterative process of taking an object and changing it to another object. We're not even talking about that anymore. We're talking about the possible worlds framing. We're not talking about transitioning one object to another. We're just saying, here's an object A, here's an object B. There's a series of possible worlds with either one or multiple predicable differences that transition between that underlie the transition between A and B, even though we're not actually transitioning A to B. And they're saying, if you go through those series, where in the series is value lost, or is it just lost at the end or in the beginning? Is there any misleading about that?
Well, what I'm saying is, if the person were to hold to that it's the conglomeration of all of those properties, then appealing to possible worlds would just be moot.
Well, no, it wouldn't be moot. It would actually provide information. What they would say is that at no point in any of those possible worlds, with the exception to the end in the back of the original, to the penultimate, not even the penultimate, the ultimate would actually make the difference. They would just say, nothing actually makes a difference until I'm back to the original object. That actually provides information. It's perfectly coherent. It doesn't entail any contradictions, and it actually provides the interlocular information.
No, but what I'm saying is, if you say, look, if we go to possible world, we go and start swapping traits or multiples of traits, at what point is it in these possible worlds where the value is lost? Well, it might not be in any of those possible worlds, right?
Yes.
Because it's,
that would provide information. That would say, okay, so if it's not in any of the possible worlds, well, it has to eat. Look, we say,
yeah, but what I mean is it's a moot point.
Wait,
is that
Shamos, come on, I let you go on. Wait, I understand what you're saying. I really think I understand what you're saying here. We go to the penultimate possible world and say, is value lost here? Now, he would say no, because it's not lost in any possible worlds. Now we go back to the original and say, is value lost? If he says value is lost, that provides us useful information. And the hypothetical is no longer moot because it provided us useful information. It tells us that that any predicable difference other than the ultimate would not change the answer. If he says no, value is still unchanged, my original my answer actually is changed when I'm back to the ultimate, then that leads into a trivially true contradiction. So either way, it would not be moot. It would either lead to a trivially true contradiction, or it would provide us information about the other person's position.
I mean, why doesn't he just say? Why doesn't he just state for clarity? Okay, I'm willing to accept that. Why doesn't he just state for clarity's sake? If a human wasn't a human, would it not have all the same properties? Why does he have to use something? Because why does he?
Not everyone gives the human as a trait as an answer. Some people don't care if it's a human as the trait. Some people say all sorts of things. Some people can say, well, look, we've had so many people just bite the bullet on human mentally handicapped people, like it wouldn't be a problem if they would roast them or and make barbecue out of them. So that's why it's just an all-encompassing for any interlocutor that comes in and just say, okay, look, here's the series of possible worlds. Is it the penultimate possible world? Is it any of the series of possible worlds? Or is it none of the possible worlds and you just go back to the original? To me, this is something, I don't think it's deceptive. I don't think it's dishonest. If it's specified out that way and framed that way, it gives us useful information. It doesn't entail any contradictions. So I don't see a problem. Now, look, just Shamos, the way I've presented it to you, like, do you have a problem with my framing? The framing that I just put on the table with the possible world? Like, is there a real problem here?
Yeah, I told you I'm willing to accept that if you appeal to it in terms of possible worlds and start swapping out traits,
okay, cool.
It might give you information. But what I'm just saying is, if asking the question that I took you as asking earlier, whether or not at what point in these possible worlds is there a value change or something like that, might just be begging the question because they might think it's a conglomeration of all those traits. And then you just said,
even if it's a conglomeration of all the traits, then that would still give you information because you would still have an answer. They would have to give an answer at some point because at some point in the series of possible worlds, look, just what it means to go through the series of possible worlds, they are conglomerating trait differences. There would be a series of differences that would be accumulating between one object and another. And if you say no and keep saying no, if you go back to the original object and say no, there's a trivial contradiction there. So the answer would have to change unless someone wants to contradict themselves. Now, that point could be somewhere in the series of possible worlds, or it can be right at the end, where you go back to the original. In either case, you get information about the person's view of value, and you can then start to attack it. You can make certain statements about possible entailments of those views of what a person values.
Okay, I'm going to move on to some of my other criticisms, just as long as you know that the end of the decision tree that ends in a contradiction is something.
Sorry, Shamos breaking up for everyone else? Or?
Yeah, Shamos is breaking up.
All right, it might be
1 second. Hey, is this better?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So with that framing, so that criticism is off the table then. Okay. So we're gonna move on to the next one.
Well, I mean, like I said, I think it's deceptive. I mean, is it what you mean?
What's deceptive to the way I? Wait, in the possible worlds thing, you think that's the...
No. I mean, I told you. I said the way that if you just say something like, keep in mind that the premise that leads to contradiction is something like John does not have all the properties that John has. Okay, but it's
which premise?
the one that leads to the trivial contradiction, obviously.
Which premise leads to the which premise are you?
So the first question that he asked in the argument, if you say no, that they don't share a common property, even though they have all the same traits, you're led to a contradiction. But it's just something like saying the person who's contradicting himself would be saying something like John doesn't have all the properties that John has, or something like that.
Yeah, or in the possible, or you don't. It doesn't have to be that way. You can just say, or in the possible worlds, they would be the person who would just be saying there is no possible world, for there's a difference. There's only a difference in when I go back to the original, or there's no difference when I go back to the original case. In which case, that would be a trivial contradiction, which you would agree to.
Yeah,
and
I don't think that you should rewrite the premise to commit them to saying John doesn't have all the properties that John has, because referring to it after it has all the same properties as a non-human animal just would mean that it would be human. And so, but anyway,
it's human, but I'm not just bones in all the traits, because some people don't care about humans. Some people have other things that they care about. But anyway, look, regardless, so I'm just not appreciating anything deceptive about the hypothetical world framing, because the connection is very trivial. If someone maintains there's no difference, even when going back to the original, because that's a trivial contradiction.
I already told you what I thought was deceptive about it. You're referring to something that has all the traits of a human as a non-human animal.
No, not in the possible worlds one. We're not. In the in the framing I just delivered, that was never said. I'm not referring to any.
No. Listen, keep in mind, I'm criticizing this video and this decision tree that Isaac has. And I told you I'm willing to accept what you said.
Okay, cool. But what I'm saying is
in the way that it's represented in that video is extremely misleading, especially when after he ascribes all the same traits to it, he then refers to it as a non-human animal again. It's problematic.
I understand. Okay, Shamos. So if you have that view, what I would tell you is that everything I'm presenting here now that you've agreed with, and you say, okay, well, that's actually not deceptive the way you've agreed with it. Isaac has gone on video clarifying it to be that way. Isaac has gone on video saying that this is the framing I'd like. Isaac has gone on video signing off on this possible worlds framing. So if you're just saying like, okay, maybe you should go back and change the original video, that's a different issue. But you clearly, if you agree with me that it's not deceptive in the way I framed it, then you're going to agree that the way Isaac clarifies his argument is not deceptive.
Yeah, I mean, if all you're saying is take a bunch of possible worlds in which we start swapping out properties or, multiple properties, and then tell me at what point the moral value is lost, okay, then it's just going to be obviously trivial that at some point, if you ascribe one value and the other not, as you start replacing properties, somewhere down that line, up until the end where they either have all the same properties, that property is going to be lost.
Right. And it's trivial, and we I think we both agree on that.
Yeah. Okay.
So so with this framing, so there's no issue with this framing, correct? Or is there something?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's other things going on. So in the other side of the argument, where he says that on one way is where you get reduced down to some reductio, right? And I think it's kind of
wait, where does it say that?
It's at the bottom of the decision tree where you make up a reductio.
Oh yeah. You can say like, oh yeah. So if someone actually gives a property difference, then you wouldn't show a contradiction, but you would, if you want to show that it's an absurd position, that you would have to deliver some sort of reductio, presumably.
Yeah, but I mean, keep in mind that that's kind of a misnomer. So like take the individual subjectivist, right? That just thinks it's just his subjective preferences or whatever. Now, if you whatever reductio that you would be doing would be some type of external critique. You wouldn't be doing an internal critique, because there's just what it means to have that moral property is just to have the thing that he prefers, and it could just boil down to just being, a human or something like that, and not because it has any other properties or anything like that. And I mean, if you or get down to something which he just says a base thing, this is a difference between the human, right? And it's some bare value judgment, right, of his preferences. Now, you're not calling that a reductio is just a misnomer. What do you mean that? See, and I've heard Isaac say this stuff to Jack in the past, and it's always been just some of the most insane shit that I've ever heard. He's saying what it means to be a reductio is not a whole lot of other people wouldn't agree with your view. But that's not what a fucking reductio is. I mean, you to do a reductio is you take his position, presuppose it to be true, and then derive a contradiction from it. If what you mean by reductio is
if the only reductios that exist on your view are reductios that are contradictions, then sure, as you define that.
Well, what I'm saying is, it's absurd, right? And what you mean by absurd is that other people think it's absurd.
So I look, if I have been shown to have a view and it leads to, and by the way, I say this as a subjectivist. If I have a view and that view leads me to be at odds with like just about everyone's view of morality, I would like reflect on that. I may not be convinced based on it. I may not necessarily be convinced about it, but it would at least allow me to do some self-reflection.
Let me ask you a question. What if it was the other way? What if the view that the person had, the one that you're saying is absurd, is actually the majority view?
Oh, then maybe it would be.
I can re-examine your view then. So if everyone woke up tomorrow and thought that it just boiled down to some property like having 23 chromosomes or whatever, something dependent to humans, and everyone woke up tomorrow and thought that way, would Isaac start re-examining his view? Would you fucking start re-examining your view?
I think if everyone all of a sudden said that, I mean, there may be some people who would start reflecting on it, but they may very likely not be convinced by it. But at the very least, look, just present with realization of the knowledge that.
I mean, that's not what I asked you. Keep in mind, that's not. Wait, what is that's a non sequitur.
Wait,
I said, would you change your view? And I said, would Isaac change his view? And then you responded that a lot of people would change their views.
Wait. No. You didn't ask me if I would change my view. You asked me if I would reflect on my views or examine my views. Distinction.
Right, but then you responded, a lot of people might reflect on their views.
No, I might even reflect on my view, but I don't think I would.
Okay. So I'm not sure how that's at all relevant. Right? So,
yeah, because
basically
it's
now
relevant.
The argument just shows that even if it's not in the majority, if it's in the majority, you should reflect on it. If it's not in the majority,
not that you should reflect on it.
And then
wait, come on, man. Look, I'm not saying that you should reflect on it if it's not in the majority. It's just something that ends up happening. It's just like something that in our experience ends up happening when people are shown that, oh, wait a minute. Well, there's two things that can happen. They show, oh, wait a minute. There's an entailment on my view that's out of accord with the majority of people. It tends to be the case that people reflect a little bit. Another thing that can happen, Shamos, is that they may realize that there's an entailment on their view that's out of accord with their own values. And that's what actually happens sometimes even more often. That some people like, okay, I've actually realized that one of the entailments of these views, what we're calling a reductio, is actually out of accord with my values.
Yeah, I'm not calling any of that. That's not relevant to anything that I'm saying. All I'm saying is we could construe a view of some type of subjectivist that it just what that moral property did boil down to his base preferences. We could find one distinction between these animals and a human that only the humans have. He could ascribe that he has that preference. And then the way in which and I'm just criticizing the manner in which you say that you're reducing that person to absurdity. You're saying something like...
Let me ask you this, Shamos. Let me ask you this. So let's say someone really just has this valuation of to say, okay, my valuation is, the trait of having black hair. And for all beings that, some animals have black hair, they're on the table to eat. Some humans that don't have black hair, they're on the table to eat. Some humans don't have black hair, they're on the table to eat, including, blondes especially. So, like, if someone has that, like in a moral debate, for example, when someone says, okay, like that's a reduction for absurdity, if they tease out that, entailment of a person's view. Now, you could say like, okay, that's deceptive that we're calling it an absurdity. is there anything that you would call it, Shamos? Like, what would you call a person who has that sort of entailment on their view that they would, just barbecue all the blonde humans? Like, would you?
Well, I
do
mean,
you think absurdity would be fair or not?
What I'm saying is, whatever it would be, it just wouldn't be an argument. I might call him a crazy motherfucker. I might call him insane. I might call him whatever. But whatever I'm doing there isn't an argument, right? I'm not. You've gotten to some point where you just fucking stick your tongue out or flick the guy off and say nanny nanny boo boo or some shit. You're not at that point. You're just no longer arguing against.
This isn't part of the name the trade argument, though.
No, it absolutely is.
No, it's not. It's not part of the deductive tree.
Look, what I'm saying is it is part of the deductive tree. Maybe you've.
No, it's part of the dialogue.
Oh yeah, the deductive tree we've already spoken about. I don't know why we would go back to that.
So, but that means it's not part of the argument then. It's part of the dialogue tree.
Yeah,
we're not making it an argument.
Okay. So
how is what we're doing?
So you call? Well, look, don't say that it's not an argument, because in the second part of that dialogue tree is something that is an argument. It's when you're saying that you don't. Their property is a difference, yet you don't know what that property is. And then when you say no, that you don't know what that property is,
sounds like an assertion.
What's that?
It sounded like an assertion, but not an argument. But
well, look, you're concluding.
Let me get it on the table. Do you have the dialogue tree on?
No, can you? Somebody sent me the version of the deductive tree, but I
can we get it linked? I don't have access to it right now, but let's get it linked so we can go through it together.
I mean, it's certainly an argument. I mean,
no, I don't take the dialogue tree to be an argument. Just because I don't think Isaac does either. Isaac takes the deductive tree to be an argument. Isaac doesn't take the dialogue.
Okay, so the only part of it is an argument is something that's just trivial.
Yeah, and it would only be presented to someone who rejects the trivial something.
So let me get this straight, because I think we've about got this wrapped up then. I would love to go through the dialogue tree with you real quick, but I think we're about wrapped up here. So let me get it straight. This famous name the trade argument, right? The hallmark of Isaac's internet career, okay? The argument only proves that if someone says John doesn't have all the properties that John has, then they've uttered a trivial contradiction. That's it. That's the argument.
Yeah, or if there's no difference in any of the possible worlds, or if they say there's no difference in any of the possible worlds after affirming the moral difference, then yes, that's they would.
That's not an argument. That's just something trivial. I mean, I take.
Well, you'd be surprised. Well, it is an art. No, it is an argument.
Well, what I mean by that is, it's not the type of argument that actually proves something non-trivial. Okay, it's like
okay, but that's why it's only being delivered. That's why it's only being delivered to people who reject something. That.
I mean, it's like me.
So what?
I mean, it's like me saying something like, "Hey, I got an argument. My argument for humans is something like humans are humans or something, and I prove that humans are. I've concluded human. I mean, that's some type of art. I mean, I suppose.
No, the purpose of when we say the name the trait deduction. That's the purpose of that argument is not to turn everyone vegan. That's not what it's meant to. That's not the purpose of the argument. The purpose of it is just to be delivered to someone who affirms a very specific thing to show that specific thing is a trivial contradiction, and then to move them along to the dialogue tree where they can discuss what value differences there are and what potential quote unquote reductios there are.
Yeah, but if it's a reductio, but you're not calling it an argument, remember?
That's fine.
I mean, don't you know that? So you're just using reductio.
Neither would you.
You're using
you do. Same way you would do it. You would just call. Look, if someone again, remember the example I gave you with someone roasting all bonds. Like, what word do you think would be appropriate for that? We're just using. And look? What word you told me? Like, oh, you're a crazy person. You're ridiculous. Like this.
Okay.
Like, I don't see a difference.
Okay, so to be sure here, the name your trade argument is to. The only thing that it actually argues for is something trivial by your own admission. Okay?
Deduction.
The rest of it, okay. And then the rest of it just is you saying that most people don't agree, or you're ridiculing them, or saying like you're fucking silly, or insane. Like You're just being like incredulous.
Well, no, that's not the right. They're only after exposing their entailment, after exposing certain entailments of their value system, which provides useful information. Because once they do name the difference, and then they do concede that, okay, if that difference was there, that it would be okay to study these beings or whatnot. That's valuable information. And then we can start exploring what the difference is. Again, it's what it is. It's a dialogue. It's a Socratic dialogue. Is what the rest of the
okay, that's cool. I'm willing to accept all that. Is there any way you could, because I want to say one more thing, and then I think we're about done. Did you send me that link so that I could look at the deduction tree? Because I think what's going on the other side of it actually can be construed as an argument.
Okay. Do you mean the dialogue tree then?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to... Okay, here I have the dialogue tree. I'm linking. And then here I have the deduction tree, and I'm linking the deduction tree in general.
Can I be heard? Okay, so let's see. Here, this is the part that I think. Okay, look. Okay, now, so this is going to be insane. This is much worse than I thought. So you've affirmed that on this side of the tree, there are none of this on this side of the tree is an argument, right?
Yeah, if I take an argument to be, I take an argument to be premises and a conclusion.
Okay.
To at least two or more premises and a conclusion, then yeah, I don't see.
Okay. Do you think that if you show through how someone's answered that they've contradicted themselves, that you've given an argument that they've contradicted themselves?
No, you could just make an assertion that they've contradicted themselves.
I didn't say that. I said, do you...
You can also show that they've contradicted... Okay,
show that they've contradicted themselves by they've said something like P and not P. I think that's an argument.
Oh, so that in the so I see what you're saying.
Do you look at the bottom of the decision tree there? It says,
I'm looking.
You've contradicted yourself by affirming that rejecting.
Yeah, Shamos. Yeah. That's where. Yeah. So that's where in the dialogue tree, that's where you would go to the deduction tree. Remember, it says C name the trait deduction tree. So they're telling you, hey, now move over to the argument here. It's basically a sign that says, hey, now is the time to deploy the argument. But
No. I'm talking about the one on the bottom, Avi.
Let me see.
All the way on the bottom with the no. You've contradicted yourself by affirming that rejecting that trait is X.
Oh yeah, but that wouldn't be shown with an argument. That's just someone who says
that is shown through an argument.
Really? What's the argument?
Which traits? The trait is X. Do you maintain that trait X in spite of the reductio? No, I don't maintain that. But then they've said that the trait is X.
Yeah, so that's a trivial contradiction that can be shown without any. I don't think you even need an argument to show that.
I mean, it's just an argument. That is an argument, though.
Wait, an argument is a
why
set
would you deny something so
conclusion? Well, no, because what
are your commitments to denying this?
Wait, an argument requires premises and a conclusion, which this doesn't have in the bottom over here. Look, the trait is okay. Look. Do you know which traits define this point? Yes. Which traits? The trait is X. Do you maintain the trait is X despite this reductio? And they say no. So then they're saying the trait is X and the trait is not X. That's just a trivial contradiction. I don't know why an argument is...
What I'm saying is if you assert that they've contradicted yourself, you can actually prove that they've contradicted themselves. And you would do so by appealing to the past thing that they've said in the dialogue. And so... I mean,
yeah. So what's the issue? Why does that require like?
I'm saying that is what an argument is.
So what? Wait, if that's what an argument is, then
you've contradicted yourself. You've uttered P and not P. P and not P is a definition of a contradiction.
Wait,
therefore, you've contradicted yourself.
That's an.
What's that?
Again,
no, that's an that's an argument.
Oh, the answer is the conclusion of premises. Okay, fine. So if you want to say that makes it an argument, then yes, there's an argument at the bottom here. If someone says X and not X,
someone
then
they've contradicted themselves, right? And someone asks you, "How did I contradict myself?" You wouldn't say,
Okay, Shamos. Look, if you want to say that there's an implicit argument in saying, if someone says the trait is X, it is the case that the trait is X and is not a case that the trait is X, then someone has contradicted themselves. Sure. So then that path would have some implicit argument then. Fine.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying is if you assert that someone's contradicted themselves, right? If they were to say, "How have I contradicted myself?"
If you look at the tree, it only would be said for someone who says the trait is X and the trait is not X. Like it is and is not the case the trait is X. Like this is only going to be said to someone who affirms a trivial contradiction that everyone would accept as a contradiction. Anyone who knows logic anyway.
Okay, so what I'm basically trying to tell you is, I think you guys are trying to do some type of shirking burden or something by claiming the only thing is an argument. I mean, I think it does you a lot of disservice by actually saying the only argument that this whole famous naming the trait argument is giving is some trivial contradiction. Okay, that's just completely trivial. But I think you're also doing yourself disservice by denying that this dialogue is actually giving an argument and saying that people have actually contradicted themselves.
Well, look, I mean, Shamos, if you want to say that someone says...
it's not what I want to say, it's what I want you to say.
What you're saying... Okay, what do you... Wait, Shamos, hold on, look.
No,
I'm really...
I want your opinion.
I don't see the problem with it. Look, if someone... Look, I really am not appreciating dishonesty in this. I'm not appreciating deception in it. Look, and by the way, I'm someone who was not a meat eater, who was convinced by the name of the trade, and who went vegan because of the name of the trade.
How were you convinced by name of the trade?
Because it allowed me to reflect on my values and find that my values, with the entailments of my prior beliefs, were not in line with what my values truly were.
Okay, but so you were convinced by the non-argument part, just to be clear.
I mean, I was convinced by the diet. I was convinced by the diet. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't affirm that it is X and it is not X. Like I wouldn't.
Okay, so you were convinced by something that wasn't an argument. It was just like someone said something.
Yeah,
and you had
the dialogue part of name. Yeah, when we say name the trait, look, when we say name the trait, there's a dialogue tree and there's a deductive tree. Now, if you want to say that there's really a deduction, there's an implicit deduction, even if it's not laid out formally, in when someone says the trait is X and it's not the case the trait is X. Okay, sure, but that's
though? Yeah, I would say that, but would you?
I don't. I'd have to think about that. I don't think so. On prima facie, it doesn't seem to be like that's. It's clearly not formally laid out.
They're contradicting themselves, whether or not you have an argument.
Yeah, that's not a formal argument. That's not formally laid out. There's certainly not a formal argument there. It's certainly not the case that there's a formal argument in the dialogue.
Formal argument, you mean this is premise one, this is premise two.
Premise one, premise two. There's a conclusion. That's what I take to be any formal argument. Or premise, or they could have more premises, but or it could be whether it's propositional logic or predicate logic. It doesn't matter, but there's clearly nothing formalized in this dialogue tree. Okay. Now, if you want to say something can be formalized from it, maybe we could make something formalized from it. Okay, I'm open.
I mean, I'm just saying, if you were going to assert that someone contradicted yourself, you would do it through some type of argument, right?
Look, honestly, if it was as basic as someone as saying X and not X, I probably wouldn't. I probably would say, hey, listen, what it is to be a contradiction is to affirm a proposition and its negation at the same time. You're asserting X and not X.
That's an argument.
That's just a basic contradiction. Yeah, no. I understand. Okay, wait a minute, Shamos. There's a slippery move you just did there. I understand that's an argument, but again, that's not a formalized. That is
a formalized argument. That's the definition of a formalized argument.
Wait.
Okay,
no,
you said a contradiction is uttering P and not P. Mm-hmm. You uttered a proposition and its negation. Therefore, you contradict yourself. That's a formal argument.
No. Wait. It's actually not that's not exactly what I said.
Okay.
But look,
let's start this again.
If I said the following, look, Which trait? Someone said the trait is X. Do you maintain that the trait is X despite its reductio? The answer is no. You've contradicted yourself by affirming and rejecting that the trait is X. That's an assertion, right? That's not an argument. That's just assertion. You've contradicted
But that
yourself.
assertion is part of the argument. That you just gave a formal argument.
Okay, can you formulate? Show me that. Like, wait, can you actually Look,
that is.
I see an assertion.
Argument.
The trait is X. Do you maintain that the trait is X despite its reductio? No.
No, I'm saying the thing that you just said. Nice.
Okay. No. The thing I said, I understand what you're saying.
So you tried to give an example of an argument that wasn't formal, and to do so, you gave a formal argument.
Well, no, I didn't, because it wasn't. I don't see how I did.
Look, I'll restate your premises. Premise 1: prediction is of the form P and not P. You uttered something of the form P or not P. Therefore, you contradicted yourself.
Okay, sure. No. So if you want to say that there's something... Okay,
what do you mean if I want to say? What do you say? I don't get... I just said it. I want to know what you say, dude.
Hold on. Yes. If you want to say that's... If you want to say that's an argument...
No. I already said it. I want to know what you say.
I'm fine with that. But
so
that's
you say it too. So we're in agreement here.
Oh my God. Okay, sure. So if I... Okay, look, I just want to be... Look. I just want to be clear about what we're saying. So in the dialogue tree, there contains, although it's not formally laid out, there contains an argument, and the argument that can be formalized from it is, you are affirming the trait is X, and you are affirming the trait is not X. Therefore, you are contradicting yourself. I'm okay with that. That's fine. Sure. All I'm saying is it's not formally. There's nothing formally laid out as an argument in the dialogue tree.
Okay, good. So we're both in agreement. I'm not trying to.
So what's the issue?
I'm not about that. So what I'm saying now is, now that we're in agreement with respect to that, you have. So here's how I see the decision tree. On one side, when you say no, if the original question, it's just you're affirming some type of trivial contradiction, right?
Are you talking about when we're up top?
Yeah.
We're up top. First no? Okay, so the first no just
trivial contradiction.
So the first no brings and that's through a formally laid. Okay, cool.
Okay, now when we get down to the bottom of the second, what were you calling that? The dialogue, or what were we calling it? Dialogue tree. You get to the bottom of it. On one side of the very bottom of the dialogue tree, you're also giving an argument. Okay. Now, on the other side,
that's not formally laid out. Sure. Then the argument is being, if you affirm X and not X.
It could be formally laid out in the same way that.
It could be formalized, but it's not formal. It's not formal.
What I'm saying is, the only reason the one in the deduction or the one on the right is formalized is because you created a whole other flowchart that formalizes it. You could certainly do that with this part of the decision.
Yes, no, I agree. Sure.
Okay,
absolutely.
Okay, so here's the last thing. We both agree then.
What's
the other side isn't an argument. The other side is just saying something like, at that point, you're not even arguing. You're saying something like, well, a lot of people think that's crazy or insane or, like.
Yeah, no, I agree. Further work. There may be further work that would need to be done. At that point, you could say, okay, so someone is asserting a certain valuation difference, and there are a couple of approaches you can take. You can make an additional argument. There's further work to be done there to show that there's absurdity. Either you can assert absurdity by appealing like, okay, it's just something so obvious that there's really not much else you can deal with. Like, again, in the example I gave you, where someone's going to roast all the blondes. Like, I don't know what else I would, if someone just has that base value to kill all the blondes, I'm not sure what else I would do other than call them absurd. So that's honestly how I would react in that scenario. Or if it's not that obvious, there may be further work that needs to be done to develop an entailment for some sort of reductio that would be as obvious of that nature, or otherwise. Sure. Like, so what's...
Okay, so I think, in closing, I think that we kind of agree that in the parts of which that it's an argument, it's kind of just stating something like extremely trivial, and there are a host of arguments that actually conclude things that aren't trivial, and this just isn't one of those type of arguments, and
yeah, but I don't see that as the way it's laid out, I don't see that as any real criticism. Like, it's just, it would only be delivered to the parts that would only be trivial would only be affirmed to someone who would be so foolish as to deny the trivial things in both of those cases, even if you want to take this as an argument. And then we just come to the yes at the end and say, okay, well, further work may need to be done. You would have to actually, and further work does end up being done in the dialogue if you've seen the name of the debate. They don't just stop at this. They would try to actually convince the other person through further work that affirming those things would be absurd. So, I mean, I'm just not seeing the problem with it. If you want to see if these things are trivial, that's fine. I could even get on board and agree that these things are trivial, and I'm amazed at the amount of people who aren't convinced that they're trivial.
Well, I mean, take an argument like,
Josh wants to say something. I think he's been in chat.
Okay. I mean, I'm done.
Is he muted or is he muted or something? Josh, you're not muted.
Yeah, he's self-muted.
Oh, I thought I was trying to talk earlier and no one could hear me.